Today I would like to speak about the muscular system. This lesson has some science-focused content, but it's not a full anatomy lesson of muscle tissue. I will discuss the overall structure of muscle tissue, movement, and at a very basic level, having an understanding of how muscles move will help you train and develop specific muscles. The muscular system includes all the skeletal muscles and accessory structures. It provides movement, moving your arms and legs, etc. It provides mobility, moving through space such as walking and running, and produces heat. This occurs due to a chemical reaction and friction in the body. There are thousands of individual muscle cells, also known as fibers, in each muscle. Each muscle fiber is made up of myofibrils, which are collectively wrapped by a layer called the endomysium. So the way muscles are organized are the muscle fibers, which are bound together. Each bundle of muscle fibers are called a fascicle. Then each fascicle is surrounded by the perimysium, and all of the fascicles bound together is the actual muscle. Each muscle is surrounded by the epimysium. Around the epimysium is a connective tissue called the fascia. The fascia essentially is what becomes the tendon. Tendons connect to bones. They anchor muscles to bones or other structures, and their job provides movement to the bones. Muscle cells contract. They shorten, which is called a concentric contraction, and they lengthen, otherwise known as an eccentric contraction. If a muscle length remains unchanged and a force is applied, that is an isometric contraction. So back to the myofibril. Remember, these are muscle fibers that make up a muscle cell. Myofibrils store oxygen and glycogen. Both are needed. Glycogen is the energy source for the muscle, and oxygen is for normal metabolism. Myofibrils contain sarcomeres, which contract the muscle. They are the contractile units of the muscle. For a skeletal muscle to contract, it has to be stimulated. A motor neuron or a nerve provides this stimulation. A neuromuscular junction is the connection between a motor neuron and a muscle fiber. During contraction, your brain recruits the appropriate amount of muscle fibers for the task at hand. So if you're lifting a coffee mug, you will need a lot less muscle fibers than if you're lifting a bag of dog food or grass seed. Each sarcomere, if needed, will contract fully. They don't contract partially. It's either contracted or it's not. It's an all or nothing principle. The less sarcomeres stimulated, essentially the less muscle fibers are involved and the less strength you will exhibit lifting an object. If more sarcomeres are stimulated, more muscle fibers are recruited, and the result is an ability to lift heavier objects. Let's move into defining the parts and function of muscle tissue. The origin is where the muscle originates. It's typically more static and on the proximal side of the muscle. The belly of the muscle is the thick part in the middle. The other end of the muscle is called the insertion. It usually crosses a joint and moves more often than the origin. When a muscle contracts, point A moves closer to point B, so the insertion moves closer to the origin. This is the action of the muscle. Some muscles have heads. These are muscles that have more than one belly. The biceps brachii is a good example. Others are the bicep femoris and the tricep brachii. Like I said earlier, the action of a muscle is the movement a muscle causes when it contracts. There are prime movers or protagonist muscles. This is the primary muscle that is responsible for a certain movement. So if you're contracting and moving your forearm towards your shoulders, your biceps brachii is the prime mover or protagonist. When you need to straighten your arm, another muscle must come into play and be the prime mover because your biceps cannot pull the bones one way and push in the opposite direction. Another muscle has to do the pulling. In this example, that muscle is the triceps brachii. During contraction of the biceps muscle, the tricep plays a different role, and that role is called the antagonist. This is the muscle that does the opposite of the prime mover. There are also synergist muscles. These are the muscles that assist in the desired movement. So when flexing the elbow, the brachialis and brachioradialis are the synergistic muscles to the prime movers during the movement. All these terms are relative to the movement on hand. So during elbow flexion, the biceps is the prime mover. But when extending the elbow, straightening out the arm, the biceps then becomes the antagonist. Same with the triceps. When flexing your arm, the triceps is the antagonist, and then during extension, it becomes the prime mover. In the beginning of this lesson, I mentioned that muscles produce heat. This is a process known as thermogenesis. Thermo meaning heat, Genesis meaning to generate. This process is the production of heat from normal muscle metabolism and is caused by chemical reactions such as breaking down molecules. Breaking bonds releases energy. The body uses energy to create ATP, adenosine triphosphate, so that the muscles can be contracted. A lot of the energy is released in the form of heat because it can't all be captured. When ATP is broken down into ADP and phosphate, heat is again generated. So when muscle contraction is increased, heat is increased, and that is why when exercising, you get hot. Thermogenesis is also due to friction. When molecules move across each other, it creates heat. This is the atomic reaction. A good example of this is rubbing your hands together. The friction created by your two hands is generating the heat you start to feel. Other terms I want to go over are related to the size of muscle. Muscles may be named according to size. So for an example, you may have heard of the word maximus. This means a muscle that is the largest of a group of muscles. So when speaking about the glutes, the gluteus maximus is the largest muscle. Minimus, on the other hand, is the smallest, so the gluteus minimus is the smallest muscle within the glutes. There is also major, meaning large, and minor, meaning small. Longus means long, and brevis means short. Examples of these include the adductor longus and the adductor brevis. Muscles sometimes are named based on shape. For an example, a deltoid meaning triangular. The deltoid is that cap on your shoulder, and if you were to spread out that muscle, it would resemble a triangle. The rhomboids, meaning diamond shape, are muscles located in the mid-back from the spine to the scapula. Serratus means sawtooth, and these muscles are the serratus anterior and the serratus posterior. Trapezius is trapezoid, so the trapezius muscle is a kite shaped on your back. Muscles are also named according to location. The pectoralis, which pec means chest, just like on a fish. Brachio means upper arm, so when you see a muscle called brachioradialis, you know it has something to do with the upper arm. Radialis means it has something to do with the radius, which is a bone, so brachioradialis originates on the upper arm or the humerus and inserts on the radius. Gluteus means buttock, femoris means femur, and sterno means sternum. Cledo means clavicle. Mastoid refers to the mastoid process, which is on the temporal bone right behind your ear. It's that bump back behind your ear. Digit refers to the fingers or toes. Pollicus refers to the thumb. So anything that refers to pollic means it is attached to your thumb. For an example, like the flexor pollicus or the adductor pollicus. Hallucis refers to the big toe. Lateralis refers to something more lateral, and medialis refers to something more medial. Intermedius refers to something in the middle. Muscles are also named according to their depth. For an example, profundus means deep and superficialis means superficial. So if you see muscles mentioning these words, you have an idea of how deep a muscle may be. Another way to name muscles is based on the number of origins. The bicep has 2 heads, tricep has 3 heads, quadricep has 4 heads. Technically, the quadriceps is actually 4 different muscles, whereas the biceps and triceps aren't. Those are actually one muscle with 2 heads and 3 heads respectively. So it can be confusing sometimes the way muscles are named. Muscles are also named based on the direction or orientation of the muscle. So rectus means straight. For an example, the rectus femoris and rectus abdominis run straight up and down along the axis of your body. Transverse means across. So for an example, the transversus abdominis runs across your body. Oblique means diagonal, so your obliques in your abdomen run in a diagonal path on the sides of your torso. Muscles are named according to their actions. Adductor means to add to or move closer to. So your hip adductors move your hip closer to the midline of the body, which is an imaginary line running from the top of your head down towards your feet, right along the center of your body. Abductor is the opposite, to move away from the body. So hip adductors will move the leg away from the midline. A flexor means something that will bend or flex. So a flexor digitorum in your finger is an example that would flex your fingers. An extensor would do the opposite and extend something. Example here would be an extensor carpi, which extends your wrist. Levator means elevation or to rise up, like the levator scapula. This muscle helps shrug your shoulders along with the trapezius. Now let's move into the actual muscles themselves and learn their action or function, location on the body, origin and insertion, and different exercises that will work each muscle. First, let's review the shoulder. Part of your shoulder has muscles called the deltoid. It's comprised of 3 bands of muscle fibers, anterior, medial, and posterior. The deltoid originates on the clavicle and inserts on the humerus or the upper arm bone. You should focus on training the deltoid by using different exercises, angles, and styles. When you do an anterior or front dumbbell raise, you are exercising the anterior muscle of the deltoid. This is a shoulder flexion movement. The medial muscle is trained with the lateral or side raises. This is an abduction movement. Building up your medial deltoid will give you width, putting caps onto your shoulders and give you the illusion of a smaller waist. The posterior deltoid, or your rear delts, is a bit harder to isolate. Face pulls and bent over dumbbell raises will target this muscle. You may need to go a bit lighter. Keep strict form to get the most out of these exercises. If you are weaker in one area over another, start with the weaker area first. All these exercises I mentioned are isolation exercises. Isolation means the exercise is focusing on one particular muscle that you're trying to focus on. Compound movement will involve several muscles. So for an example, a compound movement of the shoulder is the shoulder press. A straight-up press will incorporate predominantly the anterior and lateral sections of the deltoid muscle, training the front and lateral side of the deltoid. Now let's move to the triceps, which is the back of your upper arm. You have 3 heads of the muscle here, hence tri and triceps. The 3 heads are the lateral, the medial, and the long head. The triceps muscle originates on the olecranon process of the ulna and inserts on the humerus and scapula. A triceps pushdown will emphasize the lateral head. An overhead triceps extension with a dumbbell or a rope will place emphasis on the long head. And a dumbbell kickback will help to place emphasis on the medial head along with the lateral head. A close grip bench press is an excellent way to attack all 3 heads at the same time. 75% of your arms is made up from the tricep, so it's something you should really focus on. A lot of people hit their biceps hard, when in fact it's only 25% of the overall arm. Whether you train for looks or function, the triceps are more important than the biceps. So let's move to the biceps. There are 2 muscle heads, hence bi meaning 2, the long and short heads. This muscle originates on 2 places on the scapula. One is above the glenoid cavity and the other is on the coracoid process. The muscle inserts on connective tissue that attaches to the radius and ulna. The long head is on the lateral side of the arm and can be targeted by hammer curls or an incline dumbbell curl. This is an elbow flexion movement. Using a narrower grip on a barbell places greater emphasis on the long head. Again, this is an elbow flexion movement. The short head, or also called the inner head, is better targeted with a wider grip, outside shoulder width with a standing barbell curl. Preacher curls and high cable curls also target the short head. Remember, you can never totally isolate a particular muscle within a muscle group, like the short head of the biceps. But you can emphasize it so it's recruited more strongly over others by changing body position, angles, and grips. Now on to the back. The back is very complex with a lot of different muscle fibers running in different directions. Remember to work the back from different angles and different exercises. I will mention the more popular and larger muscles. Let's start at the top with the trapezius muscle. It attaches to the upper lumbar region, the lower thoracic region, and runs all the way up to the bump on your head, known as the external occipital protuberance. You can divide the trap into the upper and lower trap, and each section can be focused on independently. To place focus and contract the lower trap, the shoulder blade is brought down and toward the spine in a medial direction. When the upper trap is contracted, your shoulder blades are moved up. A shrugging movement, such as dumbbell shrugs, will work the upper traps nicely. The levator scapula is also developed during shrugging movements. Retracting the scapula or bringing the shoulder blades together will work the entire trapezius as one muscle, and both the upper and lower traps come into play. Moving down, you have the latissimus dorsi. This muscle attaches from the back up to the humerus. This muscle is predominantly trained with pull-down movements like the lat pull-down. A movement like this will help you get that V-taper look along with gaining thickness in your back. Rowing movements are also great to develop thickness in the back. Seated rows, bent over rows, cable pulley rows, and single dumbbell rows are all good. Your lower back is mainly trained through 2 movements, the deadlift and hyperextensions. Moving on to the next muscle group, the chest. The main muscle in the chest is the pectoral muscle. Think of a pushing movement or fly movement, which is shoulder horizontal flexion. Both of these movements will work this area. Another muscle, the pectoralis minor, is located underneath the major. These muscles originate on the ribs and sternum and insert on the humerus. To train the upper chest, you need to lie on a bench. A bench set at 45 degrees while pushing up or doing a fly movement will emphasize the upper pectoral muscles. Once you drop your arms down to the midpoint or just above your chest, your middle chest comes into play, especially if you're on a flat bench. A decline bench or cable crossovers will work the lower part of your pec muscles. The serratus anterior is below the pectoralis and has a serrated appearance to it. It also attaches to the humerus, and this muscle brings the arm down and forward. Next is the abdominal wall. The rectus abdominis is your six-pack muscle. There is a left and right side. Rectus means straight, and you can see a straight up and down muscle on your abdomen. It is a section muscle, and that is why you can get that six-pack look. Those sections are different bellies of the muscle. This muscle originates on the pubis, and when the muscle is contracted, the trunk flexes. The muscle crosses several spinal joints and causes the trunk to flex, which is exactly what happens when you do a sit-up. The external oblique muscle first tells us it's external, and oblique tells us which direction the muscle fibers run, which is diagonal. Internal obliques are inside the external obliques. They also run diagonal to the torso. The transversus abdominis is located underneath the internal obliques and runs across the torso or perpendicular to the spine. Train your upper abs through crunching movements. When you bring your hips in and up or are doing leg raises, that will work your lower abs. Exercises for your lower abs include hanging leg raises or lying leg raises. Your obliques don't necessarily need to be targeted and can be developed through other exercises. Moving down to the legs, the main muscle groups in your legs are the quads, glutes, hamstrings, and calves. Quad means 4, and there are 4 different muscles that are part of your upper thigh. The 4 muscles in this group are the rectus femoris, vastus lateralis, vastus intermedius, and vastus medialis. All these muscles attach to the patella, which attaches to the tibial tuberosity. The quad muscles originate on the anterior superior iliac spine of the ilium and extend the knee. You can isolate your quads by performing leg extending movements like machine leg extensions, as this will really focus solely on this muscle group. The glutes are a muscle group that consists of 3 muscles: gluteus maximus, gluteus medius, and gluteus minimus. The gluteus maximus originates on the medial border of the sacrum and inserts on the greater trochanter. It is a hip extender and also plays a role in hip adduction. The gluteus medius originates on the iliac crest and on the greater trochanter and is your primary hip abductor, or it basically brings your hip away from your body. The gluteus minimus comes off the border of the sacrum and runs into the greater trochanter. It is an external rotator of the hip. The hamstrings are located on the back of your leg, and 3 muscles comprise this muscle group. These are the biceps femoris on the lateral side, and the semitendinosus and semimembranosus on the medial side. These muscles all originate on the ischial tuberosity, or otherwise known as your butt or sits bones, and insert on the lower leg on the tibia and fibula. If you want to move and isolate these muscles, a leg curling or knee flexion movement will do just that. An exercise like lying leg curls will really isolate the hamstrings. So moving on down to your calf muscles. The 2 main muscles of your calf are the gastrocnemius and soleus. There is also a smaller group called the plantaris, which is located under the soleus above the gastrocnemius. The gastrocnemius is a large belly muscle you can see on the back of your leg. The soleus is behind that muscle. All 3 of these muscles become the Achilles tendon. If you really want to target the soleus, which is going further down your leg, it's going to be worked mainly with seated calf presses. If you want to work your gastrocnemius, which is the belly and the bulk of the calf muscle, a little higher up towards your knee, then you will work that with standing calf presses. So to develop your legs, calves, hamstrings, and quads, I find for me it works really well to have higher repetitions. So I will sometimes do around 15 to 20 reps as a minimum, but your body may respond with less reps. I mentioned some ways to isolate the above muscle groups. They are a good way to warm up muscles before doing any kind of compound movements. A compound movement is going to bring in more muscle groups. So with squats and leg presses, now your glutes, hamstrings, and calves are activated as well. You can work more or less of certain muscle groups depending on foot placement. For an example, if you are doing leg presses, moving your feet up higher on the platform will engage your hamstrings more. A neutral position will engage more of your quadriceps muscle. Lunges work all muscle groups, hamstrings, glutes, and quads. It is a great finisher exercise to a workout. Other muscles in your lower extremity are the sartorius. This muscle originates on the anterior superior iliac spine of the ilium, and it inserts on the medial part of the tibia. At the hip, it can flex, weakly abduct, and laterally rotate the thigh. At the knee, it can flex the leg. When the knee is flexed, the sartorius medially rotates the leg. Turning the foot to look at the sole or sitting cross-legged demonstrates all four actions of the sartorius. The adductor group is another group of muscles to note. These are your groin muscles. There are four muscles that make up this group: adductor magnus, adductor brevis, adductor longus, and gracilis. They originate on the pelvis and insert down on the medial epicondyle of the femur. They adduct the femur or bring your leg toward your body. Now we have covered all the major muscle groups in the body. If you have any questions, send me a message and I will help you out.